birthday, guys. 40th anniversary, big celebration. As I was saying, Charles, this is much more about Kathy than it is about you. But what I wanted to explore was kind of what's changed in the, not in the 40 years, because I know you haven't been there that long, Kathy, but the 37 years you've been there in that business development role, and, you know, kind of how different it was for you when you started compared to Charles when he started a few years ago. You must have been like at school when you first started. So kind of tell me about that initial phase. What was it like joining Microart 37 years ago?
Well, it was kind of dynamic because Microart had just come into the office environment. You know, they started as a much smaller business and then they developed into the office environment, and that's when I joined them. And at that time, they were strictly a PCB layout service bureau. So we were doing printed circuit board layouts on drafting tables. And, you know, we watched that evolve very quickly when it started. So it went from, you know, we don't like to say colored pencils and drafting tape.
Yeah.
Very quickly, we went into the PC, and that was with Pad software. Pad software was an evolution to our business, actually, because, you know, we were using great big photo plotters to make film that we were developing and, you know, inspecting manually in order to build a printed circuit board from it.
Yeah. So what was your first role? Was your first role in straight into business development or?
Reception.
Ah.
I started as the receptionist right out of school. Yeah. I was right out of school and I started as their receptionist.
I'm kind of always curious when you start a business like that and you open the doors and you've got a receptionist the first day. Do people kind of just turn up at the door looking for printed circuit board services, or, you know, is it more about outreach or?
It was, you know, it was a very small community. We were in Scarborough, and that was at the time, that was the hub of the PCB. Motorola was there. At the time, IBM was there. And our founding partner had come from Motorola. So there were quite a few already networked connections and a big demand for PCB layout. We had, you know, at one point we had 12 people doing PCB layout for us on drafting tables.
Yeah.
So it was kind of dynamic at that time. And, you know, the funny thing about it, Phil, is that Microart's business has always been in a growth position. We've never had a year where we've stepped back.
Wow, that's crazy.
So when the PC software came out, that was a big evolution for us, because that allowed us to send our PCB designers home on their personal computer, designing printed circuit boards, learning how to do it on software. That was a very big evolution. So when that evolution happened, we decided to take a step forward and we went into PCB assembly. Okay. And that was the launch of the Microart today.
Yeah, that was the launch of the business as you know it today. Absolutely.
That's
so
right.
A big evolution for the business, but also a big evolution from you. When did you come out from behind the sales desk and get out into that?
I did it actually fairly quickly. I was probably the receptionist for, and it's going back, you're really digging into my memory bank, Phil. So I would say I was probably the receptionist for maybe 5 years. And then they actually asked me, they said, do you want to train to be a PCB designer, or do you want to go into sales? And as a young girl, sales just had, you know, a lot more of an exciting shine to it.
Yeah.
So I picked sales at that time.
Yeah, and a very different sales process back then. I guess a lot of time out in the car, a lot of time out visiting clients, a lot of time kind of face to face introducing the business to them.
There was, and Phil, I was infamous for dropping cold calls. So, we did a lot of hand delivery of product, and that was a big part of my role. So I was in a car dropping off printed circuit boards to clients all the time. It was prototyping business, so everything was about speed. So I once got on an airplane and delivered boards to Florida so that they could get them that very day.
Yeah.
So we were all about speed. And while I was out dropping things off, if I saw a sign on somebody's building, I would just drop in and introduce myself. And we have a lot of our current customers came from that original introduction.
Yeah, well, that's the way to do it. I used to have a wonderful sales girl worked for me when I was running a PCB company back in the UK. She did exactly the same, but she always had a box of donuts in the car. That was her little secret. She would just knock on the door and say, "Hey, I've got donuts. Can I speak to the purchasing manager?" And somehow she always got through to the right people. So it's all about, it's kind of all about building those relationships, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So Charles, when you look at the difference between then and now, you don't get to just cruise around the neighborhood looking for accounts, especially over the last couple of years when we've been in various different layers of lockdown. But fundamentally, the process is very similar. It's all about building those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathy and I joke all the time that we can't wait to get back in the car. And I don't think the process would have changed very much if we didn't jump into this pandemic.
Yeah.
We in Markham, we're just 20 minutes from where it all started, that being Scarborough. We are definitely a tech hub of Canada. And there are, dozens and dozens of companies that, open up in these little strip plazas, and we drive by them now, we're like, yeah, we got to go knock on that door, but there's no cars in the parking lot. Let's get the cars back in the parking lot so we can go knock on some doors. But our value pitch is all about relationship and partnership and transparency. So I don't think it's any different, right, Kathy? I mean, that's what you wanted.
It's exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah. And I just want to pinpoint that because so much of our relationship started with prototyping. You're on what Microart, I think our reputation is infamous for, is we are on the fly changes. So, we are reacting to customers' scenarios constantly and doing it on the fly as we go.
Yeah.
And that's something that is, always still present in the CM industry.
Yeah. I love sorry, Phil, I love the start to finish, because when you jump in the prototype phase, there's no other option than to be transparent, because you're inviting your customer right into your factory to, assist, work alongside, because there's no work instruction. There's, there might be errors in bill of materials. There might be substitutes on the fly. So they get to see you in action. And, Kathy and team, the legacy, our average tenure is over 10 years. Just this great attitude of grit, get it done, figure it out, problem solve with the team, internal and external. And I think most OEMs, when they're looking for a CM, want those behaviors at the production level. So we really don't know any other behavior, which is outstanding.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it, Kathy? It's about getting the character of the business across. And you talk about starting with the red and blue layouts and photo plotting and that whole side of printed circuit board design, and then going to the CAD systems, and then adding on PCBA on top of that, and now you're doing box build and more complicated stuff. And the business is completely different, but the fundamentals are the same. It's that relationship. It's getting really close to the customer, and as Charles says, inviting them inside. It's getting them through the door and getting them to see what it means to be a Microart customer.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think out of, you know, from our customer base, Phil, going forward, or sorry, going backwards, I think at least on 80% of the time, you know, we were dealing with the owners of the company. So Microart would interact with the buyer, we would interact with their engineering team or engineer, and then we would interact with the owner as well. So we always had a very top level relationship with our clients, and it did prove for a long-term relationship.
Yeah. And when you look at that development of the business, obviously there's been, as well as the development through the capability, there's been a big scaling of the business. You know, there's a lot more of you now. There's a lot more customers. How have you managed, do you think, to keep that quite intimate relationship with customers, even though it's a much bigger business?
I have to say it's through our team development, Phil. So, you know, we really have what we sort of call Microart's secret sauce, is to develop a small team that familiarizes themselves with the client and their needs, stays with them, and grows with them. And it's through that team development and the team interaction with the customer. You know, one of the problems we have as we grow older, Phil, is getting our customers to wait at the door for their escorts.
Yeah.
Because they're so used to having just a dive in,
Yeah.
and, you know, they know where their product's being built.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have a little bit more of a more formalized process to that
more
now.
Systematic. And Charles, from a leadership point of view, is it just a question of looking at what Kathy's been doing for the last 37 years and thinking, how do I clone that? How do I get 7 or 8 of those so we can, you know, really grow the business?
Yeah, as we grow our sales team, and we are adding across the U.S. now, a lot of our customers are, you know, within a few hundred kilometers of our site here in Markham. We really keep the whole team involved. So Kathy's been involved in every BD's introduction. I use Kathy as a sounding board and a right hand in our sales team, because we have to get the right flavor, as you said earlier. So, you know, if someone's going to be selling at, you know, 100,000 feet and not dig into any details, that's probably going to be a much harder transition for us to accept internally. There's a lot of involvement. Our salespeople today, they don't just grab a lead and then run on to the next lead. It's quite involved. And you know, Kathy assists with operations the same way she, you know, assists with a delivery if it has to get done. It's that gritty core value that we've talked about in the past. You know, we need to all be in it together. And when we're looking to expand, it's really, we're looking at the values first, and then kind of the sales competency. But
and what about the technical?
Some junior and some senior, and then they grow with us.
And they, you know, they riff off each other and improve each other's performance. What about the technical side, Kathy? You know, you've obviously been in the business for this whole period and learned as you've gone. With new people, how much of the technology do you have to teach them before you can release them into the wild?
Well, you know, fortunately, they often come with quite a bit of background information already in their hold. But so that's mostly just going through the tours and, you know, familiarizing them with the facility and some of our key ingredients that help to ensure our clients that their products are going through, you know, stages that ensure that they're going to see the quality that they're looking for. And it's one thing that Microart, you know, has always, you know, it's hard to pull Mark Wood off of the capital investment wheel, because his joy is new technology and new equipment for us. So
Yeah.
it's actually fun to grab hold of, you know, what he's purchasing, Charles, and how it's benefiting our growth. And surprisingly, some of the more innocuous pieces actually tend to take more time off than we ever imagined, because, you know, we did it manually for so long, we didn't realize how much time it was, you know, using up.
Yeah.
Great
So
example.
it's been a lot of fun, and not a difficult share with our teams.
Yeah. Today's month end, and a new machine showed up on the dock, and Mark knew that was coming in yesterday. So, you know, he's in his work gear, and he's got a pump truck in his hand, and he's putting a new line in.
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat to see. But you know, you'd think you'd be running around. It's month end, but no. If a new piece of equipment comes in,
that's
Mark's
exciting.
on it.
Yeah, that's a new toy, and that's got to be unwrapped, and that's got to be played with right away. Yeah, that makes sense. Last question I wanted to ask both of you. The last 2 years, we've just had one disruption after another. You know, it was the trade wars, then it was the pandemic, and now we have this big component issue. That all puts a bit of stress on relationships with customers. Without giving too much away, what's the secret to maintaining good, solid customer relationships through periods of so much disruption?
I would say two things, Phil. Number one is instant communication, always. And then number two for us is transparency. So, you know, communicate where your difficulties are, communicate, you know, the efforts that you've put out, and then the customer is usually ready to stand up and add his team to it. That's what we've seen in the last, I would say, 8 months now, is true partnership with our customers. You know, even going right back to the redesigning to get some of those more difficult parts out of the mix, which, you know, is, you know, incredibly difficult for some companies to be able to change product and even just a rev. But that's what we have seen a lot of.
Yeah, open and honest communication, that's a huge part of it. What about you, Charles? Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I just reflect on my early days here coming into the pandemic, and you know, I'd only been here for a few months, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And the first urgent phone call we received after was one of Kathy's very old customers, and they ended up being our largest customer last year. And it's like they came and knocked on the door and asked for a favor. You know, how can you guys help? How can we scale? What can we do? And we just, you know, turned our boardroom really into a war room, brought in samples. How do we do this? How do we do that? And, you know, the whole team rolled up their sleeves, the customer included. And, you know, we launched into pretty high volume production to meet the needs of the world, really, for assisting, you know, life in the hospital. And it was great. And I just think it was just that openness, and as Kathy said, that communication. So there was daily, hourly communication at some points to get going, because it wasn't IC shortages back then, it was sensors. You know, the whole world was looking for sensors, and it was interesting. But
it is really fascinating, and it's when everything's under pressure, you see where the real value is. And you know, Kathy, there's no doubt when you go through the last year or two that you've gone through, it really pressurizes those relationships, but you really learn, you know, what is fundamentally valuable to your customers. And it's, you know, it's not that technology, it's not necessarily that machine. It is just that great, open, honest partnership. And a lot of people talk about partnerships, but this is kind of when you get to walk the walk, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is, Phil. And we have seen it, you know, pushed to the wall and reacted to it. And it's been challenging, but it's also been very rewarding to us as well. We have really dug deeper into some relationships that we didn't think could go any deeper. But they can.
Yeah,
They
and it's
can,
fantastic.
and it's been very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, guys, thanks so much for your candor and thanks for sharing some time with me today. Really appreciate that. Happy 40th again. Another 37 years for you, Kathy, do you think?
A few more still, a few more.
There you go. That's good. I think Charles is pretty happy about that.
Yeah, don't go anywhere yet.
That's it. Stick around as long as you can. Okay,
right.
guys, thanks so much for
right,
your time. And yeah, look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you.